In episode 27, we're delving into a thought-provoking topic: contradictions and repetitions in the Torah. How do they impact our understanding and interpretation? Before we begin, make sure to hit subscribe and ring the bell for more biblical insights. Firstly, when discussing contradictions, it's clear that we are not referring to apparent contradictions. Most contradictions raised by scholars are merely apparent, representing complex ideas or different aspects of the same idea. These contradictions can be found in every book and composition, and they do not necessarily touch upon the question of authorship. For example, contradictions in the Torah, often attributed to the documentary hypothesis, are not proof of multiple authorship. An example is the perceived contradiction between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 regarding the creation order of plants and man. In Genesis 1, plants were created on the third day and man on the sixth, whereas Genesis 2 mentions the absence of certain plants after man's creation. However, this refers specifically to edible plants, not all vegetation. Critics often see contradictions where none exist. For instance, they interpret Genesis 8, 5 and 8, 9 as contradictory regarding the visibility of mountaintops during the flood. But in similar Babylonian flood stories, this apparent contradiction is also present, suggesting a stylistic choice rather than a true contradiction. Further, contradictions between Genesis 1 and 2 are often seen as proof of parallel chapters, despite Genesis 2 not being a creation story, but rather about the beginning of human civilization. Similarly, criticisms of the literary historical method, such as in Hammurabi's Code, highlight its limitations in dealing with apparent contradictions. Another contradiction involves the secular versus religious explanations of events, like the war with Amalek. This is more about the different narrative styles than actual contradictions. Y.A. Seligman's criticism of the mixing of realistic and theological explanations in the Book of Judges reflects a lack of understanding of the Bible's narrative style, where natural and divine causes are often intertwined. The meaning of a contradiction. Contradictions between different compositions are interpreted as opinions of different people. But in a single author's work, contradictions must be intentional. If an editor could not change sacred texts, how did they manage to create a coherent book from different documents? The presence of substantial contradictions in the Torah suggests they are not the result of negligence. The traditional explanation for these contradictions involves the evolving understanding and application of laws over time, reflecting the changing circumstances of the Israelites. Historical contradictions in the Bible are also often the result of dominant interpretations rather than actual inconsistencies. For example, the varying descriptions of Moses' father-in-law, the nature of manna, and the location of the tent of meeting are all subject to different interpretations rather than being outright contradictions. In conclusion, understanding contradictions in the Torah requires an appreciation for the author's intent and narrative style. The Torah, reflecting a complex and evolving tradition, cannot be easily dissected into separate conflicting sources.